Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another edition of Grown Folks Business. Um, I just want to say I'm so appreciative as always to occupy the space with some good folks. Donnie, appreciate you always keeping us on the rails and riding down the track smooth. And Jay, I'm glad you could join us tonight. You were one of the people I was definitely looking forward to unpacking this topic with. So glad that you could make it. Um, Tonight we're going to be discussing America and guns, a love affair. Um, I don't want this to be something that comes across as political, and I hate to even preface it that way. I'm keeping this on the sensible, common sense track. I cannot do political conversation, but so much we have to make sure we voice that we're talking politically when we get on this topic in that way. So that's not the primary point of our discussion. This is purely about common sense things. I mean, I play golf. I don't play golf in thunderstorms because there's a strong chance that a lightning bolt might choose to strike you. Lisa, glad you could make it. Definitely always welcome you in this space. And I got two of my hitters. I hope that doesn't go over badly since we're talking about guns in America right now. But I got two of my mainstays, and I greatly appreciate you coming to share some time and space and thoughts on this topic. So, Lisa, you and I had spoken earlier, so I know you have some opinions about this matter. And again, I was just saying before you got here, I'm not trying to politicize anything or make this some type of us versus them mentality. It's just a discussion, as everything we do in the space is. So, don't want any people out there feeling like, oh, this means that or that means this. Um, I don't even want anybody here professing whether they're gun supporters or gun haters. I just want us to have a good, robust discussion and common sense being the primary thing that we keep in mind as we go through this. So I think it's no secret the reasons probably for me reaching a point of this becoming a topic for us to discuss tonight are some recent shootings that have taken place. Ralph Yarl, Kalen Gillis, um, just some kind of strange activities taking place in our nation in regard to people pulling into the wrong driveway, people knocking on the wrong door. Some young ladies on a cheerleading squad in Texas got in the wrong car briefly, and people just willing to pull the trigger and not have one moment of discussion, debate, uh, point of understanding as to what's actually taking place. It's just, hey, I'm here to protect myself. What does that actually mean, though? That's something I think we need to unpack as well. So um, I'll start with you, Jay, since you were here for it first. Lisa. So Jay, why are we so in love with guns in our country? I have some historian thoughts about it, but what are your thoughts? And we may align, we may not, but I have some thoughts. So, what are your thoughts, man? Why are we so in love with it?
The funny thing is, I was going from a historical perspective because it's attached to the American identity. When they arrived on the scene, they used force to get everything that they had. They introduced a new way of battle, a new way of crime, but also a new way of taking things that doesn't necessarily belong to us. And so taking away guns from America is literally taking away part of its name because it's so intertwined within its identity.
I will definitely agree with you in terms of violence itself, and yeah, the technology existed to a degree, and so on and so forth. I think there was a usefulness. There was a real usefulness at some point because you know there's some wild animals and beasts running around, and guns make it easier to survive at some point. I think some of that love comes from the mythology around America's expansion and the need to tame the West. Lisa, what are your thoughts? Why do you think we're so in love?
Ooh, so I don't have a historical perspective. I don't even know much history around it. I just think that people gravitate more naturally to things that are easier or seem easier. And especially when the consequence can't be immediately felt by you. So it's like, okay, this is going to be easy to solve my problem. Um, and you don't really know what you're going to feel until you feel it, but you're naturally going to gravitate to the easier ideal of solving particular situations.
So you think of it as an easy way out, and Jay thinks of it as something that is just baked into our very founding of existence. I remember, and this is way before my time. I remember this show that was titled, and the title is always what got me. Have Gun Will Travel. I don't know if that's something you guys. It was like an old Western show. Um, and the title speaks for itself, right? So if you're living in the wild, wild west and you got a gun, you can go where you want to go and do what you got to do. Um, and that I think is what continues to lead that mythologized energy towards the need to possess something that protects you, that keeps you safe, that keeps your loved ones safe. So what or who are we protecting ourselves from? Because again, I'm not thinking that there's bears and mountain lions on the horizon getting ready to jump out at me in my backyard. And I don't live in a place where that should be taking place. So, do you guys have any thoughts on what or who we are actually protecting ourselves from? Lisa, I'll start with you.
So for me, when I have this conversation, because I've had the conversation with a varied amount of people and perspectives, people who feel vulnerable often think or feel like it provides them more security and lessens their vulnerability. Yet, when I challenge, and I like the word challenge because I always like to give the worst case scenarios, excuse me, I offer the statistics around how many people actually get hurt more. More people get hurt by having guns that you don't have any idea what situation you're going to be faced with, and then to not go practice and not become familiar and comfortable, that fight flight or freeze thing is real. And so when I tell people about those statistics, it gives them pause, but only for a second, because then it's like they feel better with it than without it. So to me, it's like a no-win situation if someone has decided. And to Jay's point, we have been conditioned to believe what the status quo is putting out, as well as conditioned to believe whatever the masses are saying they believe in. So that's the troubling part. Like, wait a minute. Like, this is statistically evident that this is going to happen. Do you go to a gun range every week? Do you break your gun apart? Do you clean it? So on and so forth. Because those are the things that they say will help you not get hurt. So that's what's troubling to me. Okay.
So you kind of look at it like there's a responsibility that comes with this thing, which there is, because you can end someone's life or your own or someone close to you accidentally. And I think the statistics show that most of the time that's what happens. Accidental gun deaths are a problem, and it's, I guess, along the lines of what you say. They're not locked away properly. If you don't know how to maintain them properly, if you don't know how to make sure they're not loaded. I was shot in the ear with a BB gun when I was a kid, and it was no fun. And it kind of, deterred me from the thoughts of, playing or messing around with guns, because once you pull that trigger, you cannot reset. It's gone, and it's going to hit what it's going to hit. And if it misses everything and hits harmlessly the wall or the ground, then how fortunate are you? Because it does massive damage to the human body if it comes into contact with it. Jay, what are your thoughts on that? What or who are we protecting ourselves from?
I think that that's a loaded question. And before I get into that, it's funny. A BB gun, a BB pellet ricocheted off of a target and hit me in the eye when I was a kid. So yeah, it didn't cause any damage because it like bounced and you close your eyes, but open my eye, the BB fell out. So I was the same way. I was like, keep them guns away from me, because it taught me at an early age that even your intended target may survive, but the one you didn't plan on hitting is the one that goes out. I think back to your question, it's a loaded question. I think it's a two-prong, especially considering the social dynamics in America. In this case, I am going to use the BIPOC community. I usually shy away from that. The BIPOC community is protecting themselves from what has been. And I think the non-BIPOC community is afraid of what could be, meaning like retaliation and things of that nature. So when we start talking about social dynamics right now, people are quick to pull a gun out because some refuse to go back to how things are. And some are afraid of retaliation, are afraid that history will return the favors that was so granted to us early on in history. And I think that a lot of people are not willing to have that conversation. So it's by any means necessary mentality to survive or to live to see another day. And that fear of retaliation or returning is, I think, is the biggest culprit about it, because this is why there's so much attention on reprogramming, redirecting history, or reframing the way history truly happened to soften the impact, to lessen the chances of some type of internal violence or retribution in our current America.
Yeah, measures of control were definitely created for black men not to possess weapons, and free formerly enslaved people or free black people. Laws were on the books to make sure that uh, ownership of weapons by them were discouraged. And I think that's pretty much what you're alluding to. Depending on who wants the guns and who's doing anything with the guns, things can be dictated a certain way in a certain fashion. Yeah, because BIPOC is not one of my favorite things, but I
Right.
get what you mean by that. You
In
got
this
something else?
case.
Yeah, go. You
Yeah,
got
I
something
wanted
else?
to
Go.
add to this because I keep having this conversation too about generations being worse. This younger generation is not the ones that's killing everybody. If we want to be clear, that young boy was shot by an 80-year-old. So it's really like, and a lot of the millennials are not babies. So the millennials on up, the generations on up are doing these things. And we keep saying that the present generation is worse, but we're the ones that are having the temper tantrums. We're the ones that are shooting people. We're the ones that don't have control, but we're blaming the younger ones. And that's because we have a pulse on what things truly used to be. And we're introducing our ideologies and saying that the younger generation is corrupt. But who is doing the corrupting? A lot of these generations are presently being raised by the former generations. A lot of the things are being introduced, and they're sitting there saying, oh, it's this generation. Well, who raised them? And we can't say, oh, they wasn't home. And no, a lot of these parents was home. And like I told a lot of people, even on my Facebook post, I went to school with some of you. I know what happened. You can't sit there and lie to me. So a lot of times we do need to have a conversation about who is truly introducing it and who truly has unresolved issues that we refuse to address. I'm gonna leave it there.
Well, oh man, you
Go ahead,
lighten my
Lisa. Go
fire.
ahead,
Oh,
Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa.
you lighten my fire because I'm like, what? It's my fault as a parent, as a caregiver, as a guardian, um, because I literally lost friends. Y'all know I was responsible for 5 little people, and they are millennials, and I don't even know the other measures of who they are, but it didn't make sense, and I wasn't even educated then. It didn't make sense for me to let my 8-year-old play Mortal Kombat. I was like, I'm gonna let him shoot people for fun. That just didn't make sense. And so as I got educated, and that's why I love sociology, it was in me that if you predispose an 8-year-old and you develop their brain that, oh, this is play, and oh, but they seeing blood and they seeing people fall, and then they go out, and now my oldest is 31. And if he'd have been exposed to that at 8 years old and developed and Mortal Kombat 15, then at 31, if somebody bumps him in the shoulder, I can clearly see a disconnect between the actions, the actions and repercussions of those actions after you got desensitized to it. So, oh, it's just a game. It's okay. Well, you let your kid do that. Mine ain't doing that. So people stop talking to me. So thank you, Jay, for even, saying, yeah, wait a minute, Lisa, you raised them kids. You kind of responsible for whatever they got exposed to. So what you blaming them for? And so I'm gonna switch gears for a second, because I also try to be in this worst case scenario kind of vein. Some years ago, when a few years ago, when I had a gun, and when my daughter got diagnosed with cancer, and I knew I would have to have her child, at least her son, and at the time I think he was about 5, at my house a little more. I even told the police I want to get rid of my gun. Right? I had it because I wanted to be safe, and I was going through some stuff with someone else. But I said, I don't even want it. I don't want to have it around just in case I forget to lock it up. Because I had the block box. I had the lock to go through the thing and all the thing. But, and even the police like, no, Lisa, don't worry. Yeah, but,
Now,
yeah, but.
real quick, Lisa. I think that the third grader who shot that teacher, that parent had all of the things. Kids can get into stuff. I'm sorry, that's just the facts. We figured it out. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead. Finish this. Yeah.
So I say that to say that if we stop, well, you gonna be all right. Just don't worry about that. So to the point, and I'm like, what if it wasn't worth that to me? And I'm a believer too. And I'm like, look, God is gonna have to handle this one, because I didn't feel confident enough in my humanity that I'm gonna worry about my daughter with her breast cancer. I'm gonna worry about this little kid. I'm gonna forget about that gun. Or I'm gonna forget that he can get those keys. And the kid's smart. Like, I taught myself to swim at 5. So if I could do that, and this little boy, whatever. So I think we do. Every person that has charge over any individual and shaping them and molding them, we have culpability to the product that we send out into the world. So you're gonna have to miss me with somebody else did it.
So I'll say this firstly, and I have two things I wanted to mention, especially off of what Jay mentioned about the racial dynamic, because that was one of the questions. But there is a cathartic element to video games and TV shows and things of that nature. But I do believe too much of anything is not good for you. And that context has to be given, Lisa, to a child that's playing a video game, and they need to know when they need to stop. They need to know, when the limit's been reached and now it's time to go pick up a book or something that reminds them that they're in the real world. And I have definitely seen, because I'm a gamer, but I've seen games go to a level of visceralness in terms of how violence is portrayed. And the the Call of Duty games are ridiculous. The fact that you're isolated a lot of times playing online and you're killing other people. There was another, thing about Mortal Kombat. You knew you could never rip off somebody's head and freeze them and, make a spear fly to your hand and say, get over here. That's just not real. Fantastical. We can kind of find some disconnect. But when you are all the time, immersed in these VR type games or first person shooters where you're doing military campaigns and things of that nature, I don't think that's very healthy either. But we got to acknowledge that not everybody turns out to be some mass shooter or something. But Jay, the question I was going to ask in regards to the things that you alluded to was, is there a racial dynamic mixed into our gun obsession? And I don't know if you would care to further unpack that, but that is literally what we were kind of touching on and, dancing around a little bit. So is there a racial dynamic mixed into our gun obsession? Protecting from the other is what I was thinking. So you can unpack that further if you like.
Okay. That's multi-layered, because the race dynamic, or where race comes from, was accredited to Richard Henry Pratt. who use racism as quote unquote a good thing. I think we've all heard the famous saying, "Kill the Indian, save the man." What he was talking about, take away all of the culture that is within that indigenous person and replace it with what they deemed as civilized. How did we get them to a place to force them to go to that school? We first showed them what would happen if you don't comply. That was the introduction of guns. Not only did we come here and we, America, come here and take the land, we used it by force, and we showed them that they were less than, and we had a better way in order for them to survive and live. That same mindset has not changed throughout the system. So what happens with those who are oppressed? They try to figure out a way to no longer be oppressed. So when we start using this black on black crime and stuff like that, it really irritates me, because intraracial crime is high within all races except the Asian culture in America for some strange reason. But everybody else is high. And that's because crime typically happens where close to people's homes, and people typically stay in their intraracial mix. And we don't have those conversations, but we only use it on black crime. So if we look at statistics, if the black population is the minority statistically wise, it will be a higher percentage when you're looking at statistics. If the quote unquote white, because they definitely have changed the definition of white, is higher in population and density, it will be lesser statistically and percentage wise when you're looking at that. But it's really more people. It's more white on white crime that is happening than black on black crime. And then now that you done changed the definition of white, you don't put more people in that group. So yes, it was introduced as a way of control. It was introduced as a way to gain control, and it was introduced as a way of stabilizing or maintaining certain status quos within certain communities that are attached to certain racial groups, whether they are true or valid or not. It's the intent in which they are put in place. So I think it's multi-layered, and all of those things are taken into account when we talk about guns.
Yeah, so I'll definitely respond to the historical context of someone like Pratt and those who decided that, extermination or forcing your culture onto native indigenous people was the move, the way that things had to go. Individualism was the thing that they really tried to force upon native populations, Jay. And those were those schools like, something I recall was Booker T. Washington actually worked at, what's the college in D.C., not Howard, but the other popular HBCU. No, it's I should know because I had friends that went there. Morgan State. I just had a little help, off camera help. Morgan State. So yeah, I think that's what it was. So anyway, yeah, those places existed in some capacity to ship in natives and try to get them to adhere to ideas around individualism. And that's the crux of America to a degree. And I think that encourages a level of self-preservation that does excuse behaviors that are not considerate of the whole and devalue someone else, in that process. So yeah, I see Jay nodding his head. I'm glad that resonates, because that's what I don't disagree with, what you were saying in that capacity. I do also acknowledge that, just like other groups that are absorbed into this monolithic thought, natives were not necessarily a monolith. They actually had negotiations at points with the United States government to some degrees, in some capacities, and a lot of times they wanted those guns. They wanted guns because they were more efficient at certain points for hunting and for doing whatever else, and for fighting other tribes. So it is very layered, Jay. But I know we can handle it here. That's what we do in this space. we battle through the layers. Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to add to that dynamic, the conversation around the racial dynamic mixed into gun obsession?
Um, No, well, not the historical racial. Like y'all got that. Like I'm just looking at why
Talk
y'all
about
doing this stuff.
Snowfall. We can talk about it contemporarily. We ain't got to keep it there. Look, it's all million one place we can go. Go ahead. You ain't got to go history.
Okay, well, I'll talk about the fact that I had a very pointed conversation with a family member on some people's perspective on guns and the contradiction to valuing access to certain types of weapons that should be reserved for defending country or high level war. And I'm just still confused. So for us to be such a developed country, yet we are not developed in keeping this in check as other developed countries who do not have access. People don't have access. Regular people can't just go buy guns. Um, it just seems really weird to me. And if something seems weird, I just want somebody to help me understand. And like I already admitted that I had one, I'm not a fan just because it's too many things that can go wrong. And when too many things can go wrong, and what this person said was that the people that are killing people are people with mental health issues or people who are on mental health drugs and they have bad reactions and all this other stuff. And I said, wow, that's interesting. Well, okay, well, let's dial it back then. Who making money off the mental health drugs then? So, but I didn't buy into that part because, everybody's got some challenges, but I don't think you should just blame that for whatever reason, whatever triggers someone to do that. But I just don't see that it is helpful. And it's a shame how a certain subset of people can make things just open for everybody. And that's what's unnerving to me, because no matter how many tragedies, no matter how many upsetting things, oh, after Sandy Hook, oh, something's going to happen. Oh, after Parkland, something's going to happen. And then what happens? Now, North Carolina, you don't even have to get a permit through the sheriff's office. It's like, wait a minute, are we getting better or are we getting worse? So this is just interesting. That's the best word I can use to describe, because I also don't know that there's enough brave people. There's enough anti people that are brave enough to go up against the traditional bully. Like there's bullies everywhere. And so you have this small subset of people who are an enormous population of bullies that too many people just aren't brave enough to say, no, this doesn't make sense. That's stupid. Let's stop this. Let's band together and stop this. So ideas, y'all.
Yeah, that's the latter part of our discussion, but you are absolutely on track with everything else you brought into the equation. And I wanted to circle back and touch on something Jay said also. Lisa, you were there for a large part of my campaign, and one of the things I would always respond with when people were bringing up black on black crime, or things taking place in black neighborhoods. You harm who you're in proximity to. You rob who you're in proximity to. Jay's point is just top level. I mean, it's who you're close to, and generally we are concentrated in these areas along racial lines. That's just the way this thing works out. So there's a mythology around black on black crime, and that needs to be unpacked and discussed and then done away with, and we can understand better that that doesn't necessarily exist. And you mentioned Asian crime. I mean, it was a shooter in I think it was San Francisco recently, that guy that committed a mass shooting. Yeah, he was Asian and he was in his community. So anyway, I had this question, and I kind of take your time with it. I'm going to ask both at the same time. And Lisa, I'll start with you. Um, does ownership encourage wisdom or recklessness? Um, does ownership embolden one to pursue conflict? So take your time unpacking those two things. And it is a subjective question, and you can base it on who you've been exposed to or how you might have reacted when you were empowered with the ownership of that weapon.
Well, to me, you are who you are. Someone pointed this out to me maybe a week ago. Whoever you are when you're younger, you just develop more into that person. I have generally been a overly responsible person. And it could be because I saw a lot of trauma when I was young, but I believe in nature and nurture. Okay. And so I don't think it empowers, it's not empowering people to be more responsible. I think if when somebody get it, if they're reckless, they just go be more reckless. And you get access to weapons and you are responsible, I believe you're going to be more responsible, because I did hear once that people with money are going to be more of who they already were. So if you're a giver, you're going to give more. If you're going to be greedy, you're going to be more greedy. And I see that same thing with weapons and access to weapons. Like people, I have seen people laying weapons around, and I'm like, wait a minute, I thought you were smarter than that. But they were reckless with everything else, right? They drove without seatbelts. And so I don't think that we just have to teach people, train people to be more responsible people and have those accountabilities in place early enough to develop responsible people, especially in this culture, in this time.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That is a great responsibility to possess a firearm, or to have high proximity to some weapons that can be harmful to others. Jay, does ownership encourage wisdom or recklessness? And does ownership embolden one to pursue conflict? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll only be echoing really pretty much what Lisa was saying. I think the judgment lies a lot of times on the influence of certain things, meaning I do believe you are who you are organically. And I think certain things give you confidence to be who you are, i.e., drinking, i.e., anger, doing some types of substance. A gun, in my opinion, is a form of intoxication or influencer to allow you to be who you are. And I think that some people like, oh, they were this way and that way, or they were so quiet, I never saw. No, they wanted to knock your head off a long time ago, and now they just got the strength to do it because they found a means to do it and survive. Like, let's talk about survival. If I know I can't beat you up, but I want to beat you up, I ain't gonna fight you if I feel like you're gonna beat me up. But if I know a sure proof plan that I can take you out, I'm gonna use that because I still want to survive. And so it's not that this person has changed. This person just showed you who they were all the time. And I hate when parents act like, especially parents, because I'm a parent, they act like they don't know their kids. It's nothing that them people can tell me about my girls. And I can sit, I ain't never went in a room and be like, I don't know where they got that from. Because I can look at their family tree and see enough already and know what type of fruit they are because of the tree that they came from. And we don't have those conversations enough. So I think that if more people were honest and talked about the issues that they have, like if your daddy had a temper problem or your mama had a temper problem, your mama probably done shot up some people or shot at some people or threw some knives at some people, threw some cups at some people, bricks or rocks. You know what I mean? You're just a progression of that same temperament that nobody resolved then. And I just feel like we don't have enough organic conversations. And I don't know if you're going to ask a question about possible solutions, so I don't want to go there yet. Okay.
That'll be what we end on. So
Okay.
yeah.
I was about to go there because I was about to say, yeah.
Look, y'all
yeah.
do it anyway. So I don't, I ain't gonna hold it against you. That's just what y'all do, and that's what I like. So yeah, man. I totally get how you should be able to observe the individuals that are in your life in a way, and that includes yourself, self-awareness, self-evaluation, like knowing that you might become more of a jerk if you have a firearm. I like something you introduced that I think is critically important also. A bad day can happen anyone, and a bad day can be influenced by drugs, alcohol, or just being angry, right? So now you've got something to really express your anger and know that you probably not gonna be harmed immediately. You're gonna get off what you want to get off before that happens. So that's something that I'm very conscious of when it comes to people who become gun owners or have always been gun crazy or what have you, because hey man, you can't go but so far in their proximity with jokes, with games. And if you're drinking, you might want to not stay around too long because something click up here. Next thing you know, somebody shoot. I had a friend one time. She looking for a parking space. I'm on the phone with her, and somebody took the parking space, and she, oh yeah, he lucky I don't have my gun. Why is he lucky you don't have your gun? What would change the narrative? Now you would be able to, say, hey, I want that parking space. So that type of dynamic kind of makes you kind of say, I don't know if I need to trust that this person has the temperament to own something that can get somebody up out of here. So that's the way I look at that type of situation also, which kind of brings me to and through the next question. I'll let you guys have it if you want, but is it guns or is it people? Jay, I'll start with you like you had something else you want to add anyway.
Yeah, because I had a frat brother pull a gun out on me before, and it was just pure jealousy. It was, you make me angry, why you blah blah blah, and had a gun in my face. And I still remember it vividly. To this day, I knew exactly where I was, the McDonald's on St. Andrews Road in Columbia, South Carolina. And I remember looking at the barrel of the gun, and I told him that, I said, you a P. I call him a P. And I told him that. And I said, if you're gonna do it, do it. I said, but you won't get the luxury of doing it to my face. So I turned my back and walked in that McDonald's. And I remember saying to myself, boy, I hope he don't pull that trigger. But from that moment, he will never get the luxury of being in a space with me again. It ain't no amount of apologies. Yeah, he apologized. It ain't no amount of apologies, ain't no amount of crying, ain't no amount of none of that. Because when you, for any moment, and this is anybody, when you take a moment and you feel like you own the price tag to somebody's life, or you determine when somebody's life is valuable or not, you're a dangerous person. I don't
Yeah,
need to be in your proximity.
I'm on the same page and had similar experience. And honestly, man, that that's a form of torture. That's I forget the exact term right now, but I think it's gun stress or something like that when you point a gun at somebody, because it changes your whole composition. You get, people ride roller coasters and get those butterflies and goosebumps, and hey, man, you're gonna have all of those things when somebody pointing something at you. So I completely understand that feeling and that vacation of trust, Jay.
Yep.
You can't get that back. Nah, bro. You played the wrong game and you showed yourself to be unstable. Go ahead, Jay. You had so much you want to add.
No, I was going to say, and I feel like a solution to this are two things. Some people are going to hate this, but I do think legislative terms should be tied to mass shootings or any type of violence for that case. Like, for instance, we live in a republic. We vote for representatives. If the things that you're putting in place are not causing those numbers to go down, your term should be in jeopardy. That should be a contingency clause of your term. Why? This is why we have you here, to represent America and to keep the American people safe. This is why we got a republic. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to do as a representative, that part needs to go on there and say, no, we need to get somebody else to do it. The other thing is, when traumatic experiences happen, I think that we do need to have a better integrated system. Meaning, if case in point, if Lisa was somewhere and the same thing happened to her, somebody pulled a gun out on her, if she goes to the hospital, that should be in some type of interweb, especially if she has a license, a permit. I mean, a permit. So when it's time to renew, they will have a series of support saying, hey, we noticed that you had a few traumatic experiences. Take these classes and then we'll renew your license. We have the integrated systems, utilize them if they want to, but I feel like a lot of people are not doing what they need to do. And I feel like every death should be attached to somebody's job description and performance. It happens everywhere else. How many incidents? We have to report to OSHA. So we need a legal OSHA to handle all of these situations that happen. And we lost Lisa. Dog.
Oh no, she'll be back. I'm certain. Yeah, I don't disagree with a large chunk of what you said. Now I'm fine with getting to the solutions a little sooner, and there's more to go in that. Our representatives should have our well-being as their priority, but unfortunately, that does not seem to be the case. We keep running into people who are beholden to ideas that are counter better outcomes for us as citizens, and that includes young people. Which one of the questions I was going to ask is, at this point, is there any event any event that could occur and cause meaningful action. You have any any response to that? Because I mean, it's sadly laughable. It is sadly laughable. But is there any event that you think that could occur?
What do you mean by meaningful? Explain it to me
Like
again.
you're literally talking about when legislators get involved, when lawmakers and congressmen and politicians actually start doing things to protect us from these type of things. But is there any uh, potential gun violence act that actually moves that needle? Because we don't seem to be very interested in something happening. And then if you're driving across a bridge and it's shaking all the time, then at some point you know it's about to fall. Do you get in front of that issue? When it comes to guns, it doesn't seem like it, man. We done saw some heinous things take place, including a shooting at a softball game that was being played by people who represent this government. One of them being a Republican who was shot, hurt, injured, and then is still, very supportive of loose gun laws. So, is there anything that could occur that could change that narrative? Is what I'm asking. Anything? You muted, bro.
Who? I'm not hopeful in that category because the value of life has a price tag. Like we heard, where the person even said, the representative even said in a meeting that if a child succumbs to abuse, it actually is a win for the taxpayers because the end of life also ends services. So this shows us that they're only looking at us as a price tag. They're only looking at how much will it cost. Is it profitable to change a law is what I believe that they look at more than anything else. So it doesn't matter how many people died. How much are we making, and is this helping? Some people even look at deaths as a way of controlling population. Um, so no, I don't think I'm not hopeful that there's anything in place. I think the major event that needs to happen nationally is that we as Americans need to really take this republic very serious and make sure that the people that are in office don't get reelected. The major event that needs to happen is when you start getting people in place, like those young men in Tennessee who aren't afraid to say, while we're sitting here worried about controlling teachers or controlling books in a classroom, we need to be controlling how guns are getting to the classroom. Like I feel like our lens is off, our perspective is off. So I'm the major event that needs to happen is not something that happens as a result of gun violence. It's more of how the American population makes decisions on who's making decisions on behalf of us.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot see. We started this show off with a preface of making it political, right? But you can't not do that because there's a thing that's protecting some of these malbehaviors. There's something that's keeping this possible, and that's literally if the energy is one way, if the but we've seen it on other fronts when it comes to politics. The energy is wholeheartedly behind universal health care. What happens? It becomes affordable healthcare. So it totally is at the point where we're not represented in the way that we seemingly desire to be on a base level and a majority level. So yeah, I mean, we got to figure this thing out before it's too late, in my opinion, because the rate we're going, the desensitization is real that Lisa was speaking about. And by the way, she had to leave where she was at, so that's why she got kicked out. But yeah, we got to take and recalibrate ourselves and reprioritize and then have actions, especially at the local level, to get people in there that have common sense approaches to the matters and are not doing the sleight of hand and saying we need to make sure we go over here and do something about these things that are more harmless than the things that are actually harming us. So can we call ourselves civilized? That's the question, Jack. Can we call ourselves civilized with all of this we talking about?
We can call ourselves whatever. So that's a simple question when it comes to that. But I do want to tie in when we talk about things like we said we're not going to make it political, and I think having conversations about our government is not political, because we're not saying, oh, vote for this person or vote for this. But what we are, I don't think a lot of people understand the various types of government that we have in play in America. And even though we say things, I don't think we understand how those things work. And we're not talking about governmental entity, political entities, as much as governmental infrastructure. So when we start talking about things that are systemic, we have to educate ourselves and say, okay, this is why we have a representative, or this is why we have commissioners, or this is why we have certain things. And even I was ignorant to a lot of things. Like, I didn't know the role that commissioners played in town governance. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't know how certain things are, and each town is ran a little differently. Like, a lot of stuff falls under a town manager, depending on what town you are, where you would think it's the mayor, and the mayor doesn't have the political power or the political influence like one thinks that he does. So it's so many different, or she does. It's so many different things that are in play that we have to educate ourselves on if we want to push that needle to impact change. And one of the reasons why I'm committed to value-based education is because a lot of people don't realize you can value something and it totally changes the way that you look at it. Like, a lot of people are attached to a principle of thought that they truly treasure and value, which is why gun control is such an issue in America. They're not thinking, okay, if I remove this value, which is a barrier for me and skewing my judgment, other outcomes can come out of that. They're holding on to the very thing that they value, and it doesn't matter how many lives are at stake because of that value. And it's a dangerous thing to walk around with values that you are unaware of, because you're making decisions predicated on these values you refuse to really deal with or refuse to acknowledge. So yes, you can call yourself several things from a lens that you only see, but doesn't make it true.
Yeah, you definitely what do you call hedging your bets when you got this thing to rely upon that justifies so many malbehaviors. I do not this, it's in the Second Amendment. Like, we go down that political path again of justifying things that exist on a document that when it was created, and this is low hanging fruit, but it was one shot muskets out there, and it's talking about protecting a land that is newly claimed by the people there, and saying, we got to make sure we're ready to protect it at any given time. But we just kind of messy with ours right now. I think that's something you would say, Jay. We real messy right now with how we doing this thing. So I would say we can call ourselves civilized, but we have so much further and longer to go on that road of civilization when it comes to the fact that we keep witnessing just atrocious outcomes to situations that should not have ended in violence, death, maiming, whatever. The young man knocking at the front door of the wrong house, man, 85 years old, probably can't even drive no more, but he still got a gun, still can use it. And that's not sensible in a society where we are at this point. We're going to interact with one another. We're going to. You can't go through this thing and not bump into somebody, say hello to somebody, do whatever to somebody. That's just not the way this thing works. So why do we act like that is the way it works? Why do we act like that my actions, if I'm somebody that's possessing a weapon, don't deserve the scrutiny that they do get if I do something that harms someone else? And that answers the other question that I don't think it's the people. It's not a hammer don't hammer unless you got a hand holding it and you're hitting a nail. It's the people. We gotta do what you just said, man, and let's get to a better point in understanding our value system. That's all. I'm about that as well, man. I think it's very important, and I don't pass the buck along to young people. In the racial equity work I do, man, I'm constantly discussing ways that we can function. If you're here, you're breathing air, try to make the world better while you're here. That's the best I can give to it. So we'll get out of here on this note. And you alluded to a lot of it already, but how can we do better? That's the final question for this evening. How can we do better, Jay?
Oh, yeah, I'm really on my. I feel like, and I think because I work with organizations and businesses so much in helping them realize a lot of times it's not the policies that are in place, it's the value misalignment that is in place that is causing the issue. So, like for instance, I think that we need a fresh lens on the things that we have in place. Like you talked about affordable health care. Legally, technically, we already had universal health care because you can't deny anyone who's received any type of federal funds. No health establishment can deny anyone who received federal funds acute care. And in the state of an emergency, you must stabilize it. Now, when it gets into ambulatory care and it gets into more advanced care, yes, there are certain things that are in place, and I get that. But if you really want to allow people to have more access to health care, change the way that we can add beneficiaries to our healthcare plans or dependents to our healthcare plan. If you, my brother, who just lost your job and you hard on your feet, why should I send you down there to get public assistance when somebody in your household, your brother, may have, healthcare benefits that I could just add you on to help you get by? If you want to put a limit on it, do that. But the same thing as it relates to gun control, there are things that are already in place, but maybe we need to change the way that we look at those things. There should be effective training. If the trainings that are not in place aren't working, look at that and see, okay, what are statistics telling us that there is a lack of? And if statistics are showing us that there is a lack of it, if there is more in-post shooting, for instance, why don't we add more anger management and conflict resolution to the permit training? I think that we complicate things and we make things more difficult than what they need to be because we already have things in place. Are we effectively utilizing those things that are in place? And then last but not least, I think that there is a social and civic responsibility for us to be more socially aware and more self-aware of the role that we play in these heightened situations. It could be you recording in that moment, or it could be you being prideful and don't know how to step back and say, you know what, I see you getting upset right now, let me chill out. So there's so many different ways that we can look at a situation and say, okay, what is the individual role that we're playing without blaming another individual in that instance? And I don't think we do enough of that to even move the needle towards positive change.
Yeah, conflict resolution is one of my favorite topics of discussion and one of my favorite things to mentor young people with. But it goes across the board. It's no age limit on being able to be self aware and show some measures of self control and understand that everybody can go home if cooler heads prevail in certain situations. I definitely am someone who, as you know, pays attention to media and what we're being inundated with. And I have another thing that I think gets us a little further down the road of addressing this stuff. And man, I would love to see us show more love, maybe more love making in some of our entertainment and not so much gun stuff, man. I mean, it's a lot, bro. And you got some shows that don't show the blood, don't show the gore, but you still see the gun popping off and the violence taking place. I think we need some more hugs and kisses in our stuff, man, and some more romantic type outcomes. I'll leave on this note. I watched a documentary recently on Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl in 2006, I believe it was, or somewhere in there. And I remember that. I remember that millisecond. And I remember the next day the internet went crazy. And I remember all these people lost their mind and were suing CBS. And I'm thinking to myself, CBS is the same network which at that time aired a show that was wildly popular called CSI. And there are all these spinoffs of that show now. But CSI, the original one, took place in Las Vegas. You could watch that show and see a bullet go through someone's head in slow motion on that network. But they were losing their mind over a millisecond of boob showing. So I think that shows our societal values and ideas around what's important and what's reflective of us as a people are very askew, man. So yeah, I think this is one that we could talk about for days, but I'm glad to share the time with you, bro. I hate Lisa had to get out of here, but this is exactly what I wanted to get, something from the guy that knows love and how to make this place better. So I appreciate you, Jay. Thanks for making this happen with me tonight. And Lisa, we'll catch up with you next week. Danya, thanks for what you do, man. You guys have a wonderful evening. Take care. Anybody watching, really appreciate you spending the time with us. Y'all have a good evening.